All right, everyone. We are going to get started on Truth Will Set You Free. Number 4, we are all created equal. I want to give a couple minutes to let people in. That's why we're starting a little bit after 5:30 Eastern time. Thank you guys all for joining us. I'm seeing the comments come in. I see Victor. I appreciate you being here. I'm glad we get to have a discussion and hearing a voice from me and some of the people that are going to be on this episode. So, or this edition, or however you want to call it. So it looks like we still have people joining us. Sean, thank you for joining. Pierre, as always. I think Mama J is coming in as well. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to intro this show and why, in this event, and why it's important to me, as well as I'll let the host explain why it is important to all of us in this time. So first off, I want to introduce myself. My name is Anthony Michael Russo. I started something known as #BetheChange in 2016. I think it's important that I mention that and why BetheChange was started. BetheChange was started in reaction to the police shootings in Dallas in 2016, where there were police officers that were slain while they were at they were protecting the rally that was actually against them. It was an anti-police rally, and I started thinking to myself that something is wrong. Something isn't right about the way we interact with people, the way we have conversation, the way we talk to each other, and the way we look at activism. So BetheChange was started not in the intention of being a charity, but the intention of creating awareness and creating a movement for people to be better to each other, to realize it's not the politicians in our daily lives that make up who we are and the opportunity we have to talk to other people, to be kind to other people. And I was admittedly anti-awareness, pro-action. And the whole concept was, we've created awareness for long enough. How do we act? How do we become better? And unfortunately, I'll be honest, I think in the last 4 years as a country, we've failed in that action. We still are bickering. Social media is causing clashes and anger and frustration. And I realized that in some instances, awareness is important. And this episode is discussing, obviously, the death of George Floyd, and as well as the protests that have ensued from it. And I want to look at it from different angles. And we're going to have a couple other guests besides Curtis and Aaron come on to talk about their experience and just to have a very open discussion about race. We are going to have a discussion about black and white. We've gone long enough where we've tiptoed around issues, we've avoided pain, we've avoided uncomfortability, and we need to have that discussion. This is that awareness point. I used to refer to Flint, Michigan as the exception to the rule on action, because people didn't know that the water was bad in Flint, Michigan. People needed to learn. They needed to create awareness. In this moment, for me, admittedly, complacency is no longer okay. I've said things for a long time where I don't regret, because I don't regret anything, but I realize there is a missing element to my conversation that has created complacency in me, and saying we're doing better. Sometimes better isn't enough. And we have an opportunity as a country to see this imagery of George Floyd dying and seeing how wrong it is across the board, and to have almost 10 minutes of footage of a black man dying underneath a police officer's knee, to not realize that something is drastically wrong, and for that police officer to not be arrested for several days. Now, with that, we'll also talk about the riots. We'll talk about the protests, the peaceful protests that have extended past that. And maybe they're not the ones to blame, the protesters, because there's evidence quite the contrary. And to realize at the end of this, we have an opportunity to create awareness in the sense that we actually might be in this together. So with that, I'm going to really quick go over some of the things we've got coming up. I'm going to bring my co-host on the stage, and then we'll introduce them in a second. But in this, we are going to be talking about the importance of words, listening to each other's thoughts, having an open mind. We're going to talk about, quote unquote, Karen. I think her name was Amy in Central Park. The key behind accuracy in a message, the dangers of media, and the way that it pays for them to stoke the fire between the races. And at the same time, we're going to all have slightly different opinions in all of this. And I encourage you guys to make comments on the outside. And I will warn you, that we're going to be engaged in a lot of discussions. We'll stop and look at comments, but we won't get as distracted as sometimes I do on some of the other episodes of Truth Will Set You Free. We got to learn right now to keep our wits about us. We need to learn to stay together and have intelligent minds prevailing of all races. And we're going to talk about each and every experience and how we're all different. We're all human. We are all flawed. We're not going to always say the things that are perfect, but we should be able to react to that. We're going to also talk a little bit about the fact that all of a sudden amidst this, COVID-19 has quasi disappeared, and we need to have a discussion about that as well. We're going to talk a little bit about sports, the Kaepernick philosophy, and ultimately the importance is finding truth. We want to find truth in who we are and what our beliefs are and what our motivations are to be doing this. So Curtis is in the upper part of the screen. I'm going to go ahead and introduce Aaron first. Aaron kind of brought this a little bit together for us to have this discussion this week. So Aaron Smalls, please introduce yourself. Tell us where you're from and a little bit about you.
Hey, everybody. As Anthony just introduced me, I'm Aaron Smalls. I talked to Curtis and Anthony about putting this together and us having a discussion because that's what needs to happen. It's not so much that we need to talk about it or we need to take action. It's about what any sports team does, what any business does. What we as people have to do is break down to the basics, back to the basics of being a human being and knowing how to talk to each other, knowing how to go about relating to one another, because that's what this is all about. If I start a conversation with you and I immediately start it in a way that puts you off, you're not going to do what is absolutely essential in any conversation, and that is listen. People are speaking out. People have been speaking out. They have been taking action, but the right people aren't listening. So that's why I asked Anthony and Curtis for us to do something like this, because we all have differing opinions. We all come from different backgrounds. But I've been able to have conversations and debates with these gentlemen, and we've been able to listen to each other's opinions. And whether we agreed or disagreed, we were able to take some information from it to move forward. And that is something that has gone out the window, and it has to start with you. It has to start with me. It has to start with Anthony. It has to start with Curtis. And I know it's cliche, but it really goes back to the MJ song, A Man in the Mirror. And you have to look into that mirror and you have to make that change, not just for yourself, but for the people that are around you. And to kind of wrap this up in the introduction here, there's nothing wrong, and it's highly recommended that you take care of yourself first before you're capable of taking care of other people. It goes back to, if you're flying on an airplane, the mask falls down, you have to put that mask on yourself first before you can take care of your child, before you can take care of your wife, before you can take care of the person next to you. And in order to do that, you have to take care of yourself. And that starts with listening and being able to direct what you've learned and what you've listened to in the right direction. So that's why I wanted to have this conversation, to break it back down to the absolute core, the bare bones of it, and be able to have this discussion between three gentlemen that are completely different shades and with people that are welcome to listening and being able to make a change in this country and in the world. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Aaron. So again, it's interesting. I've wanted to have this conversation specifically with you guys for a long time because we have these debates after our different shows and we have these discussions, and they're always incredibly engaging and they're real and there's nothing about them that's held back. Yet with the end of the conversation, and I hope you guys feel the same way, I feel better about my knowledge and about what I'm able to have a conversation with other people about, because we know what viral is. We see what viral is on a daily basis with the news and whatever it might be. But in terms of level-headed, intelligent conversation, that virality or that being able to go viral is what's most important. And that's why I want to do things like these experiences for people to be a part of, so that they can spread a message of how Curtis feels, how Aaron feels, and how I feel. So Curtis, go ahead and introduce yourself as well.
Yep. I'm Curtis Harkness, executive director of Regular Hero, but outside of that, just a human being. And I'll be pretty quick. A lot of people over the weekend have been saying how they felt after the certain weekend, and how they felt after this certain event with George Floyd or Breonna Taylor in Ahmaud Arbery. And as a Black person, it definitely hurt, right? But the thing that I had to not say check myself, but I had to unpack feelings that I had already kept down, because this isn't the first time it's happened. And it's not the first time I've seen things like this, which sucks. But the other thing was, there's a lot of experiences that have happened in my life that, with society, they like to say it's not there because they've never experienced it. But the one thing that I will say this weekend did was bring up a lot of that. And when Aaron brought this in to talk about, I said, this is perfect, because I've always, at some point in my life, wanted to get somewhere and put, and Anthony and I are on the same page as this, put like CNN and Fox News and all these news people that like to spin and cause division, put them in the same room and just say, what are we doing? What are we doing? Why aren't you giving me the full truth? Why do I have to watch 4 different news channels to piece together for myself? And at the same time, it was nobody's telling the true story. And one thing that this weekend happened for me was I got to talk to a lot of good friends. Like a lot of people reached out, white, Black, Latino, Asian. And I've been blessed in my life to have a great deal of diversity in my friends and even my family, which I advocate for. But one thing I definitely had to do was talk to them. And as much as you would think it's uncomfortable for, if you're not Black, to talk about this because of that, it's also uncomfortable for a Black person to sit there and say, well, for me, at least from my experience, why haven't been pushing harder, right? And it's not even like I'm blaming myself, but I had to come to grips with what was going on and how I started to realize that I've been pushing things down when they should have been addressed and come up. But I didn't have enough allies, because I grew up in different areas, to be able to lean on to be able to get there. Not saying these people were bad people or my friends weren't amazing friends that aren't Black, but at the same time, they didn't know. They've never gone through this, and it's extremely hard to understand something you've never been through. And what I will say this, and I really want to challenge people. I was watching church, which has been great, online services. I love being in church, but it is what it is, social distancing. But a church I watch is it's Transformation Church, and the pastor is Mike Todd. And he pastors out in Tulsa, and it's a very mixed church, but predominantly white, and he's a Black pastor. And watching something that I did this past weekend, he said, take a risk, and to risk to build relationships. And I could be getting some of this wrong. Again, this is not verbatim, but risk stands for relationships, intentional, sit at home and knowledge. And the biggest thing is be intentional on why you're looking to do anything, right? You want to build a relationship. That's what's going to heal this, is the relationships we build, the true relationships we build. We have to be intentional, right? I just don't text somebody and say, oh, I'm so sorry, how can I help, or whatever. Be intentional, which that means that's self-reflection. So from this conversation you're going to see and the different people we bring on, be intentional on how you receive this, because I don't want you to be thinking about your own biases, your own ideas, your own thoughts, getting ready to go against somebody, because that's not what we're here for. We're here to listen to each other and to build our knowledge. And the next thing is, sitting at home. We're all sitting at home. What can you do at home? What are you going to do? Not, I understand protests and all the other things, but after all that's over, what are you going to do? Right. And that's what we're going to talk about too. And then the last thing is knowledge. This whole thing right here is to build knowledge, because the reason we have these problems is the lack of knowledge, the lack of the understanding, the lack of the experience. And everything that you experience can turn into knowledge if you're open to learning. And so that's one thing I really, really hope that we all can get from this, is to take a risk, because that's the only way we can see effective change. And it's funny, I'll say, be the change that we want to see in the world. But literally, you have to take a risk, because it's not going to be cool. It's not going to be comfortable. And what I will leave you with this is, again, Pastor Todd said this also. We have to be we have to be comfortably uncomfortable to get into these things. And I believe it's either that or comfortably uncomfortable. You got to be uncomfortable. That's what we got to be uncomfortable to talk about this, and be okay with being uncomfortable. Because if you're fitness, you got to get uncomfortable to reach your goals. If you're business, you got to take a risk and be uncomfortable to grow. And if you're in school, you got to be uncomfortable and take those tests. But the thing is, once you get done, we hope you're going to learn and progress.
Yeah. Thank you, Curtis. So introducing both Aaron Smalls and Curtis Harkness, we are going to have some people joining us. Actually, they're just jumping on backstage. We're going to be a couple minutes before we quite get to them. But I want to continue with what something Curtis said immediately, because it flows into something that I did on my social media that created conversation. And I know that I didn't appease the person that I posted it with, but it does fall under, I use the concept that Curtis said. There has been a complacency for so long that without the pain and uncomfortability, we may not have growth. So I'm going to show the picture that everybody's seen, and some, it was referred to now as murder porn, and that wasn't the point. I posted it on the BetheChange page, so if you follow that on Instagram, you've seen it there. And all I got was respectful comments and positive comments of saying you're respecting this person. But now I see it in a different light when I posted it on my personal page. And it was the moments of George Floyd's murder and the graphic imagery that it is. And I don't want to leave it up there long, but this is the image that caused the conversation. So that is the 10-minute moment, which historically in our country, I know will go down as either the beginning of a very bad spiral or the beginning of the first time we've gotten together for change. But the comments were made that I don't and it was actually not from a Black person, but the comments were made that I am recreating pain and bringing up pain. And I responded quickly with, no, I'm not. I'm showing a moment. I'm trying to create more conversation also with everybody involved, because my captioning was very moment based, saying we need to seize this moment. We need to stop looking at the protests. We need to we need to stop looking at the riots and the violence. We need to look at the protests, and we need to look at the moment that this man died and turn him into what he can be for the rest of this world. Let's not let his murder go down in vain. And in the same token, I received that message of, you don't know what kind of hurt you might be bringing to a Black woman, a Black man, a Black mother, a Black father. And I thought about it and I said, I don't. But this is about creating conversation. And the response back to me was, this isn't about you, this is about them. And as much as right now the philosophy of Black Lives Matter, it goes above and beyond everything else, it's not about Black, it's not about white, it is about us. Because without all of us working together, there is no resolution, there is no action, and there is no next steps. So I did leave the post up. I thought about it for a long time, because I wanted to make sure that, is the hurt worth it? And just the same way that I talk about in when I coach people, when I talk to people, when I give motivational speeches, pain, failure, all of that has a purpose. If you use that pain, you grow. It works in the gym. It works in life. Any psychologist is going to tell you the same way, that you can't avoid pain. You have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. So that was I had to think through whether or not it was okay for me to show that. So that's why I'm following up Curtis's point with that uncomfortably comfortable, and then obviously opening up to you guys and your thoughts behind that image. So either one of you guys want to talk first?
Yeah, I'll jump in on that. Both of you have used the fitness as a reference. So I'll use that as well to kind of tie it together. Go into the gym to work out. You have to know the proper way to work out, or you're going to injure yourself. You can't just go in there and do what you want to do willy-nilly, or you will hurt yourself. And that is a lot of what is happening right now. People are passionate. They want to take action. They want to know how to direct this energy and this knowledge that they're gaining, but they don't have the leadership to do it. Doesn't matter how many arrows you have in your case. If you have no direction to shoot them in, they're pointless. So with this, yes, Black Lives Matter. And that is what we are all coming together to discuss, to talk about. But that's why we need to have allies and we need to work together in this. And it's going to be uncomfortable. It absolutely is. But that is the only way to have the conversation, to have the discussion, is to open up and to talk about it. And I say to open up and talk about it because I've had conversations with white friends that have said, I didn't want to ask the question, or I didn't want to say this because I didn't want to sound stupid. You have to ask those questions. You have to make those mistakes in order for people to help you and to educate you. But it's about being in a safe space so that you can do that. No one wants to ask a question or to make a statement and then feel like they're going to be belittled or emasculated or whatever the case is. But that is happening so often, and that's why people are afraid of being uncomfortable in these situations. So that's why we have to talk about it. We have to put the imagery up there, and we have to share these opinions so that way we can actually get to a goal, to get to a mission, to establish a focus on where we're going. And that's going to make us extremely uncomfortable in order to get there.
Yeah. My biggest thing too is like, I agree with that because I definitely posted, posts on Instagram and Facebook and, what I feel is true. And what I tell people is, you own your Facebook, your Instagram, right? That's your voice. I want to update you if I feel a certain way, but at the same time, I am not in any shape or form, and I don't want to say I'm not qualified, but it's your voice. It's your understanding. Now, when you do that, and I come at it that way, I also would like to know when people tell me about what I post, and I don't get upset. I kind of like Anthony. I try to explain to them why I post something, but there's some times where there's going to be miscommunications. And I was a peer mediator all through high school and college, and a lot of things were solved. A lot of problems happened just because of a small miscommunication, I didn't think that was a bad thing to say, and something outside of just white and black and Asian, all the different races. I look at sexism, right? And I'm a man, and Anthony challenged me, and I have friends that challenge. Not like I'm a sexist or anything, but there's things that we sometimes don't think when we say, or sometimes don't see as wrong, because society and how we grew up in the system never told us it was wrong, right? And is inherently wrong. And I'm open to somebody challenging what I post. But at the same time, I would want them to be open to receiving why I posted it. And if I at that point realize like, oh man, this is wrong, this is offensive because something might be, I then will go back and change it. But at the same time, if this person can't understand where I'm coming from, because this might be how I'm expressing something, I would like for them to have that same position of, if you're going to come challenge me, be open to hear my rebuttal and not just try to double down. And nothing against double down, Anthony. Double down on what your beliefs are, because some of your beliefs might be flawed. But again, we're all different people, and we should be open to listening to each other.
part of doubling down is also knowing when to fold. So there's a moment where you learn on that strategy where to fold. I do want to take a quick second. Frank's got a question for Aaron, but before I get to that, Frank Lockwood watches our other show. He's actually sometimes a guest on our movie show where we have fun and bring light to people. Frank is a doctor who lost one of his patients this last week that he's known for 30 years. And because of what he's felt, what we're doing with BetheChange and what he sees the concept and how he wanted to believe in it, he donated some money for us to share out with people. So during the show, our movie show, we do trivia, but there's something else. If you know of somebody, we've got a few of these that we can use. And since we've got a decent amount of people watching, if you have a friend or somebody that you know that's going through something where $50 or $100 can help them pay the rent, get groceries for the week, going through issues with COVID, going through issues with maybe losing the business, maybe going through being afraid to leave their house right now, depending on where they live, whatever it is, please send a direct message to BetheChange, or if you know me personally or however it is, send the message on who you might know. We've got a couple $100 from Frank Lockwood in memory of Cheryl Ricks to do that with and to have that moment. And I know Frank was interested in the show because he wanted to see what he could do, and I think we'll get to that a little bit later. But he does have a direct question right now for Aaron. Who do you turn to for channeling that energy you were talking about? And right now, do you have somebody that's going to be your leadership through this storm, or somebody to help shape his voice?
That's a great question, and that's I don't want to make this statement turn political. So this is not a political statement. This is about values and standards and about principles and about having a mentor, so to speak. So when I say this, I'm not saying things against Trump. I'm not saying things against Obama. I'm not saying any of that. I'm saying that for me as a person, outside of politics, I look at how Obama how he carries himself, how he articulates, how he deals with his family, how he deals with the country when there were statements that need to be made. I think being able to step up and have that conversation as a leader is what is absolutely critical. I think in your community, you have to be able to be that person. But again, it comes back to the core. It starts with you. What are your values? What are your principles? What are your standards? Those are going to differ from person to person. But at the core, they're all the same. And whether it's religion or whatever your mantra is, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That's the golden rule. It's karma. It's whatever you want to believe it to be. And that's what it is. So as far as leadership, I try and hold myself as an example with my actions, but I also make sure that the people that are in my circle of influence, not just my circle of concern, but my circle of influence, are influential leaders, people like Anthony's and people like Curtis's, so that I can gain that knowledge that I don't have. I then take that, and if I'm posting about something or if I'm having a conversation about someone or about something, I don't come out with negativity. I don't say, if you're going to think that way, if you're going to do that, I'm going to block you or unfriend you. I don't want that, because I want you to see that stuff. I want you to comment on that stuff. I want you to have those thoughts, because then I have a baseline of what I need to do in order to lead this in the right direction, which is why I brought this up to Anthony and Curtis, because people are having their different conversations on social media and they need to be guided. They need to be able to find resources. They need to be able to come together. And I don't have all of these answers and all these resources. I've looked them up and I've seen some of them. But there are these resources for that. So as far as leadership, as far as energy, you have to have people to have these conversations with. Otherwise, you are going to get angry. But you have to have someone to safely get angry with. Otherwise, you're going to go out into the community and you're going to blow a fuse. And then that action is going to influence the 16, 15, 12-year-old that's out there, and he's going to say, man, that guy looks like me. He talks like me. He carries himself like me. Maybe that's how I should act. So again, it all comes back to the leadership aspect, starting with you as a person, and then creating these strong communities in order to have those as the examples in the world. So as far as leadership, that's where it is a struggle. And I think that is something that we all have to have as a discussion in order to figure out where we're captaining this ship and where we want it to go.
I'm gonna piggyback on that, Aaron, and there are some exact statements, and then the next thing we're gonna do is I'm gonna start up the next topic, the next bit, and then we're gonna bring on Dex, who's backstage right now. But what you said about who is gonna be our leader, honestly, right now. So ultimately, the whole concept in the beginning of BetheChange was the fact that we don't necessarily need a leader. We need each other. Our president should be 1% of our daily life, because here's the problem. Nobody is going to speak to everybody. I'm not going to lie. There were certain things I as an Obama voter, there was a lot of things that I disliked about his leadership ability. His ability to speak was second to none. He was a phenomenal speaker, but he didn't speak to everyone. He did some things wrong that also made certain aspects of the white community upset. It made me upset for some of the things of some of his rhetoric. Trump makes a lot of people upset for his rhetoric. So what we can rely on, and a lot of this rhetoric also comes from that place of media that they spun Obama and they spin Trump, and we're not going to, unless we watch their move every moment of every day, the only leaders we have is truth. So truth becomes our leader. So like Aaron said, researching and trying to get to the bottom of everything that you know and you want to learn and that you have a conversation about. You can harbor feelings and what that is. But when you start spreading information and talking to people, you're your own hero. You're your own regular hero, Curtis. You have the ability to change people and not change their opinions, but change their outlook on the overall situation. And take the macro level and go, oh, I can change things just by understanding that everybody is different. So essentially what Aaron said is we're looking for a leader, but at the same time, we have the ability to lead ourselves as long as we are equipping ourselves with understanding and truth. So
yeah. I mean, the thing I want to say is we have to have compassion for people who don't have the same experience or share the same experience as we do, because if we don't, then you can't expect them to open up. And by them, I mean anybody that has a misunderstanding. It could be Democrats or Republicans. It could be white, black. It could be even inside the Latino community, Asian community, different. And again, I'm not lumping any one community in all together, because I know there's multiple different nationalities and cultures in every single generalized race or whatever they do for the census. But I found out some new news on my voter registration. But we have to have compassion. And that's one thing I will say. We have to have compassion for others' experiences. And if we could do that, then I do believe, like you were saying, Aaron, and even Anthony, that way we will start the change. We will be our own leaders, because you don't need a leader if you're leading with compassion, because you'll be open to hear others.
And a quick interjection before you move on. The same way I think that you said that we have to look to each other to be those leaders, and to do that, we are tools for one another. If you're in the military and you're trying to get over a wall, you have to have your team to help you get over that wall. You can't do it by yourself. Same thing with a pen. A pen can be used in so many different ways. It's a tool. Same exact thing with social media. It becomes technology that we use as a tool to help us advance ourselves. But you have to know how to use it appropriately. Otherwise, a pen can become damaging. A knife can become damaging. And that's the biggest thing right now, is that people aren't establishing what their rules, or excuse me, their standards and their values are, because they're only looking at social media and they're only looking at the tools one way. If all you see is the point of that knife, you may only see danger. So that's one of the biggest things that I think we need to look at each other as these tools to help grow. And the Black community is a tool for the white community, which is a tool for the Hispanic community. And when we intertwine all of these together, that creates America, and that's what makes us, for lack of a better word, the most badass country. But we have to do it together.
True. All right. So the next topic, I'm going to bring Dex up first and introduce him because I feel like the introduction will get missed in the middle. But I do, Curtis, do you want me to show that video next of the pastor?
No, I just didn't know if you wanted to drop into that. But I think it would be good because it's going to go into a little bit about what Dex and I are going to, bring up to the
I'll get my
table.
computer real quickly.
All right. Sounds good. All right. So here's what I'm thinking.
Or you can push it again. Again, guys, this is open. This is not scripted.
I want to get Dex on. So the thing
Let's
the thing that I want to talk about next, and I want to make sure I bring it up while Dex is here, and then after that, Danielle, I know you're being patient and back. I really do want to talk about the fear of losing this message, the fear of losing what George Floyd's death was about, and my personal experience of what I've gone through mentally of these, pardon me for saying it, these fucking riots are changing people's opinions because I have a very strong mind in making sure I want to create change. And every day I'm tested and tried, but at the same time, am I really watching what I think I'm watching? So that's what I'm going to talk about next. Dex, I'm going to go ahead and bring you up on the screen. I'm going to bring Aaron back up as well. So Dex, I'm going to go ahead and introduce you. Actually, Curtis is a buddy of yours, so go ahead and introduce Dex for us.
Yeah, so I'll let him go a little bit further. But Dex is a amazing man and friend. Met him in Miami, and just was drawn, and we've been good friends. And he's an entrepreneur and finance and like creative and just a lot of different things. But a well-spoken person. And the reason I brought Dex up is because Dex did a 4-minute Instagram talk about something that I've myself realized that I didn't talk about. And I shared it with a bunch of people, and about 50% of the people I shared with who reached back out and said, I can't believe this is exactly what I went through. And this is something that my friends are now asking me about and are apologizing or didn't understand that I went through this at the same time while they sat next to me. So that's the introduction to you, Dex. You want to just give a quick, 30-second, like who you are, where you're from, and go from there.
Oh yeah, sure. I'm actually, again, like Curtis said, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm from New York originally. Moved down to Miami about 5 years ago to pursue some development in the media space. I worked a lot in hospitality and nightlife, and I came from a background in finance. Before I had come down here, and now I actually run a agency and a members club that focuses on quality marketing and social data, and we represent athletes, getting them sponsorships and endorsements, but athletes that are actually leaving the NCAA and going into who are declaring for the NBA draft at the moment. So I've done a lot of different things. I've started a media outlet called Social Black Book, where we talked about a lot of things that were going on in society. I'm a big pop culture junkie. I'm all about pop culture. I'm all about what goes on in the media. I'm very well-rounded, I would say, when it comes to various cultures. That have various history. Whether it be white, black, Latino, whatever it is, I'm a very keen person when it comes to those things. And I thank you for bringing me on, and I thank you for bringing me on and allowing me to talk a little bit about, that video I had shared, which was very interesting because, as you guys talk about using social media as a tool, I'm not one normally to talk about anything that's political or something that's uncomfortable when it comes to, the social landscape. I usually stay clear of it. And I'm the one that, I'll use not knowing enough as my excuse not to get involved, right? I'm the person that's usually like, I don't really know much about it, so I'm not going to speak about it. You guys go ahead and fight. I'm just going to stay on the sidelines and you figure it out, right? And, it's interesting what happened because, there's times where I see people act out in front of police. I've seen my friends do it. I've seen people do it. And, I've always been torn between, the line between, things that are racially fueled, and, you know, people who antagonize other people. Because at the end of the day, I'm a realist, right? You know, I look at scenarios and say, you know, when I look at someone who's in a uniform, I'm like, this is a regular person that might not be getting a high salary. It might be making $30,000-$40,000 a year, and might be dealing with the same stress that a lot of us are dealing with. If anybody were to get into my face and start an altercation, you know, I may be one to snap back. But then there's a line that gets drawn with all of this, where you're like, okay, well, you know, there is a trend or a pattern here. And, you know, I finally decided, you know, to speak out recently. And, you know, I think a lot of this comes down to, you know, they say, you know, men should be created equal. All men are created equal or whatever. When we're all born and we all have, you know, blood in our veins, and we all come from the same place. You know, we all are born the same, we die the same. But the reality of it is, we aren't all equal. You know, some people are darker than others. Some people are lighter than others. Some people are tall. Some people are short. Some people are skinny. Some people are fat. Right. So, you know, what it all comes down to, I feel, you know, when looking at, you know, people through a certain lens or from a certain perspective, is that it comes down to education and understanding, you know, what's right and what's wrong, and what bothers people, right? Because, you know, when I was growing up, I told a story about how, you know, my white friends, as a joke, sometimes will say, "You're the whitest black guy I know," and, you know, it pisses me off every time. But I never usually, like, I kind of say, haha, that's real funny, you know, and I kind of just, like, you know, breeze by it, you know. But then after this whole thing, I went out and I made a statement, because someone had said it to me 2 nights before I posted the video, you know, in the midst of all this thing going on. And, you know, it's funny because once I actually posted that video on social media, are you guys still there? Can you hear me? Okay. Once I posted, you know, on social media, this video, I got a lot of apologies from, you know, different friends of mine, saying that I never really, you know, thought of, you know, this way. You know, I really apologize. I didn't mean to offend you. You know, it was never meant that way. But I had to explain to them, you know, when you say certain things, it stems from childhood, right? It stems from how you're raised and how you're educated, right? Even it goes back to being in the New York City public school system, where, you know, you're taught to think that certain things are okay, and, you know, it gets ingrained in people over time. And I feel that, you know, changing the outlook of someone's, you can train someone what's right and wrong, and instill fear in them so they don't do things. The same way people who are LGBTQ, right? You know, that's a community where they went through a lot, but now it's so wrong, and it's so glorified and so bad to say anything about anyone that is LGBTQ, or even get into an altercation with them, or a fight with them, or do anything, where people respect them because of the respect that was demanded from them, and that it's just wrong, right? So you know that there's a consequence, but there's no consequence for a lot of things that happen racially, right? There's no real consequence. You know, you have, you know, law enforcement systems that, you know, have been built years and years ago. Like the NYPD, you know, is probably as old as that city is. You get what I'm saying? So, you know, the transfer of power, you know, the ground that these institutions, these organizations are built on are damaged, right? So there needs to be an entire overhaul. And the reality of it is I feel like, you know, once you're in your 20s, it's kind of too late, right? Like, you know, if you don't do certain things, most of the times you don't do it out of fear, or out of, you know, an idea that there's going to be some type of ramification based on the way you behave, right? But if you truly believe in something, it's something that's instilled from a very, very young age. And I feel like if you don't, you know, change the way the education process is taught, you know, from the kindergarten age all the way up, I feel like this racism, you know, issue is going to be around for a long time. You know, and, you know, the idea is that, you know, I went on social media and I told them about people saying you're the whitest black guy I know. And, you know, the answer is why? Is it because I talk well, or I speak well, or I like skateboarding, or I like watching, you know, listening to Blink 182 and all this other stuff. Like I listen to hip hop as well, but just because I listen to things that you deem as being, white inspired, it doesn't make me the whitest black person. It just makes me a black person that actually likes your culture. You don't see me going up to, this Karen, this idea of a Karen, right? You don't see me going up to a girl that listens to, Tupac or Biggie or Jay-Z or any hip hop artist or The Baby or Lil TJ and say, wow, you're the blackest white girl I know because you listen to hip hop, right? And the reason I talk about this is because it discredits being black, right? It discredits us being black. It's like, if you're good at something, you're white. And it's like, no, I'm black. I'm just good at something. Why can't I just be good,
Yeah.
And, people only say that to people they don't feel threatened by. That's why it's happened for so long. Because if you didn't know a black guy out of a hole in the wall and you thought he was a gangster or a quote unquote thug, right? You would never say, hey, you're the whitest black dude I know, because you're trying to avoid an altercation. But people test the waters with their friends and then they say things, that they think are okay. And it is okay because that person is cool with them. So that person is going to let it slide. But in their mind, they believe that, right? And it becomes okay. And it's like, the more you speak something, the more real it becomes, And the problem is that we don't make each other uncomfortable enough for people to stop doing certain things. But I feel like the LGBT, the LGBTQ, right, community. I'm sorry, so many letters. They've done this really well. You know what I'm saying? That community has made it very, very clear that you are making the room uncomfortable if you speak in a certain way. So and black people.
So I kind of want to make it uncomfortable now, because I do want to bring up the big issue involving what people are seeing on their TV sets, what people are seeing on their screens. So I want to bring this up. So for me, as a level-headed white guy that does have some conservative beliefs, and that also is very, very big into creating change, on a daily basis, I wake up and I look around and I look at the news and I watch what's going on with the protesting. And I believe what the protesting's core purpose is important. At the same time, now that all these riots are happening, the big thing that I want to look at is people are using the Martin Luther King phrase that he said, a riot is the voice of is a result of their voice that is unheard, which is true, understandable. But at the same time, I think right now the whole message is being bastardized. We had a gentleman murdered by police. And then the first thing we see, and I've seen some of my liberal friends on social media and some of my conservatives. Honestly, oddly enough, more of my liberal friends are not getting enough of the stories to actually understand what's going on, whether it is people infiltrating these riots. So I use the philosophy of a match point. So right now you've got peaceful protests that are over the life of a man, that over the life of a murder, or the view of a murder that can create change. And then the moment that happens, when our whole country, I've never seen it, because I'll be honest, my personal opinions of the way that they martyred Michael Brown and some of the other murders didn't fit a narrative, not a narrative that we needed, but a narrative that could change minds. I'm not saying anybody deserved to die, but if you want everybody involved, this is the opportunity, because this was the first time I saw every single person I know standing in solidarity for a black man murdered by a police officer. I know. Go ahead.
What I'm saying is, I'm listening to this, and before you go too far in one direction, I do want to stop and say this. Everyone is getting involved, but the messaging, and like Aaron said earlier, is mixed with social media, because it's like that cures kills, right? A Tylenol can make a headache go away, but too many can put you out, right?
Right.
And, you can overdose, right? And social media, everybody can go out together, right? But the answer to this, I feel, is it needs to be some type of, it needs to be segmented a bit, right? And a good friend of mine called me and said that everyone can do this together, but right now, the best thing is probably representation, right? And when I say representation, I don't mean black people marching for their rights. I mean, people who aren't black, right, in this scenario, have to represent the black people, but the black people need to, or African American, right, need to take a seat. So a good friend of mine who's in the military called me and said, the only way I see this changing is the same way they do the social media blackout, where they're blacking out everything and now there's no messaging, which my buddy said something kind of interesting about maybe some primaries being today, which is ironic how you can't see anything on social media. But, maybe there needs to be a campaign where all the black lives need to stay home in the house.
Whiteout.
And then, no, they need to stay home in the house. And then everyone else has to go outside and continue
That's what I'm
marching.
saying. That's what I'm saying.
Right?
So
there needs to be no black people in the streets.
That's what I'm saying. A whiteout. So all white. Yeah, right. I get what you're saying. That's it.
Right. And then see if the tear gassing is the same. See
it won't
see if the damage will be the same, because that's the thing, right? Because then if they all march for it, will the military take action as they say they are going to? Will it matter if something is being infiltrated? Because if no black people are out and it's all white people outside, and it's the looting, then what?
It ends the narrative of the people that are trying to destruct. So that's what I want to make sure, because before it might have sounded like I'm against the protests. I'm not in any way, shape, or form. And I'm not blaming the riots on black people. Here's the thing. The imagery that I see for the looting and for the destruction is predominantly black young males. However, if you're educating yourself on all the different aspects, the videos, the photos, and it's 2020. My truth right now is seeing multiple angles of multiple videos of people that are on the floor. There's random bricks all over the country that have been set out. There's photos of them. There's evidence of that. That's completely odd. And then you've had peaceful protests all day long, and then you've got these random groups. And here's the deal. I've worked with crowds. Curtis has worked with crowds. I know Aaron's worked with crowds. If you've got 5,000 people, no matter if they're peaceful or not, they can turn dangerous very quickly with the spark of a match. So if you've got 2,000 people lined up peacefully protesting that are angry, people are angry right now, and then you take 20, 30, 40 bad people that want to just start shit, that is a match. That match lights, and they start throwing things, and people are saying the police are starting it, and I'm not there, and the videos that I see don't say that. But fact is, if one person is acting and starting the quote-unquote riot, and the police fire on them, they're firing into everybody. It's a blind crowd. There's nobody that tall. There's nobody up top. And then that starts these riots. And unfortunately, the video that we see, which seemingly is choosing to continue the division, because 5 days ago, I've never seen the country more together on a subject, ever. Now there's people fighting each other on what the importance and purpose is. And a lot of the quotes I see, well, this is why we don't help them in the first place. That's the worst mentality we can have, especially right now. The way we can do it is by educating people to go, look, this narrative is being taken away from us by certain elements, media, whether it's the mainstream, whether it's Fox, whether it's whatever direction. Look to each other and realize most of the black men that I know don't want this. Most of the black women I know don't want this. However, once there's a couple that do, it spreads like wildfire. Your social media spread like wildfire. Their comments going, yeah, burn that mother effer down. Do whatever. Fuck them. All these different things. And then you see the aftermath and you think, it's honest, you think that it's all these black people. And honestly, every day I have to reset my brain and go, it's not their fault. It's being started by other people. But at the same time, there is some self-responsibility that needs to be taken. We can't say, well, they're rioting because they're unheard. We get why they're rioting, and we understand that they felt unheard, and you guys have felt unheard. But fact is, in order for it to change, we have to change that voice. We have to say they're unheard, but that stops here.
Well, you know what? But I will say this. I agree, but I agree with everything you said, and they are unheard, and there are people rioting. But the reality of it is, I mean, you're not. Are you rioting? Is anyone in this call right now rioting?
No,
I'm not. Why? I could take a guess why I think you guys aren't rioting. I think you guys may have a certain level of education. I feel like you may have your own. Like, I have my own. Why would I riot? I have no reason to go and try to riot. What am I going to do? Steal something that I can afford anyway? I don't care about the certain things that these people care about. You get what I'm saying? So like, there's people that, there's haves and have-nots, right? And the majority of people have not are rioting. And then the have-nots translate to the people rioting and translate to the statistics of who it is that's actually doing the rioting, right? Which are, these people. And the reality of it is that if there's more opportunity in general, if there's better education in general that's available to various communities, right? Which goes back to what I'm saying about the education system going back, right? A lot of this wouldn't even be happening. We're also coming off a pandemic, right? Where people have lost a lot, right? And they've been in the house for months. There's less to do. People who have already had nothing, right, have lost even more. You get what I'm saying? And people that had a little bit and finally getting on track started losing, right? Yet there's people that have such marginal, success over other people and have way more. They're not even posting on social media. I got friends right now that are on yachts. They're on yachts right now as we speak.
Yep.
Black and white.
I know those people.
They're restaurants. They don't even give up. They're sitting there posting their yoga videos on Star Island in Miami Beach, one of the richest zip codes in the country. You know what I'm saying? They're not doing it. They're like, we're just gonna let it go back to normal. And then there's people who are outraged on Facebook that I know that are like, look at these people rioting. Why don't they just stop? We just want to open up. People who have businesses who already have money. You get what I'm saying? But when things open up for so many people, it's not gonna, be, all glorious for them again. It's not gonna be like for us. When things open up, we're great. We're gonna be at the events. We're gonna be here. We're gonna be there. We're gonna be eating at good restaurants. We're gonna be doing all these great things. But these people, it's gonna be business as usual.
So that's the background of systematic racism, which to me, the ultimate loss of understanding of the situation is thinking that Black people have had the same opportunities as white people with desegregation and college programs. It's bullshit. We've learned that if you still believe that the hogwash that was given to us 20 years ago, then you haven't educated yourselves on what the change of voting lines has been to make sure that they have been screwed over and over and over. Yeah. So systematic racism has made these people the have-nots. So I do want to move on, please. If you guys want to come back to that topic, I want to bring Danielle up because we are talking a little bit about the haves, and in the Black community, obviously, the athletes have been in some ways very outspoken, some of them being very quiet. Danielle, I know we're going to talk a little bit about just her mentality or philosophy on all this, as well as a little bit about Kaepernick. I'm going to talk about that in this part too, and my opinion why it probably wasn't the right timing. So, and why this might be. All right, Danielle, go ahead. Curtis, go ahead and introduce Danielle. Dex, do you mind? I'm going to pull you in back I like the four, but go ahead and stick around. If you have something that you really want to come up on, just mention in the private chat. We'll bring you back up.
All right, perfect.
Cool.
Thanks,
my man.
Thanks, Dex.
Thank you, Dex.
Yeah,
right.
So this is Danielle. She's amazing. Actually met her through some friends, and we've been down on a few nonprofit trips together down in Haiti and some other places. And I will say this, and this is a laughable moment, but it also shows to how and it speaks to me because I was thinking about this when I was like, how am I going to introduce Danielle? Like what she's amazing. There's a lot of things, but this is something I will say. And this is where it's funny because this is where the systematic racism kicks in to even Black people on how I view, a white woman sometimes in a presence of a lot of big Black men. And Danielle works with a lot of football, basketball, baseball athletes. And about 90%, she could probably tell me a better percentage, are Black, are big, and are very strong and outspoken because, that's what it is. And it's funny because a lot of times when I'm around these groups and I see some, people come in and usually it's like, just women in general, because I'm always hyper aware to make sure, women are protected. I'm not saying these guys at all are bad, just in some general, sometimes, as a man, you should be practicing that for our ladies. I looked at Danielle and some of the other girls that work with her, and I'm going, oh man, these are, and like, this is no offense to you, Danielle. She's not super tall. I was just like, oh man, it's like, this little white girl. She's with like literally like 15, 20 big black guys, and I'm not a big black guy. I'm pretty nice size, Anthony. But it usually you would see some type of fear, and in that sense, I always like try to come in and make sure this person feels comfortable. And I don't always say automatically as racist. Sometimes you say a lot of people and a lot of also as a woman and a man, but seeing how she reacted and how she acted with everybody and myself and others, it was not a sense, and she might say something different. She might say, just my brave face, but I did not see an ounce of fear. She actually was, handling things in charge, that's Danielle, but treated everybody with respect. I've never heard her make and again, I love Danielle, never heard her say anything, borderline like, oh my gosh, like, she's always come with respect, and I know she's got flaws and whatever else. I can never find them, but it's just in a sense of like, wow, this human being can be around a lot of people who don't look like her, not the same gender, and have such a compassionate heart to, yes, at one point it was her job, but also in that it had to be her passion, because I know that, whatever, I'll be nice. Had to be her passion to help the community. And yes, it's athletes who have a lot of money, but also it's that line of a black athlete. A lot of black athletes come from places they don't get taught about money. They don't get taught about how to act well in society, and they don't know how to pivot out of something that they've been in their entire life. And so I see a lot of black athletes go broke. A lot of black athletes get on drugs, and I say a lot, like in the past and still some now, and sometimes ends up in jail because they don't have an idea on how to pivot education and what to do. And so seeing a person like Danielle in the midst of it, in the heart of it, not just in America, but in Haiti, where, and I love my Haitian people, but we were in some really tough areas that even Haitian people I know have never been in. And she did not show fear. It was like, no, I love you. Smart, she's aware. Saying we're all aware at the same time, in a different country, but just saying with Danielle, and I hate that, I not hate, but I hope you don't feel too bad. I'm gassing you up so much, but it's all true on how she has had a heart to help those that she has not walked in their shoes or had the same experiences they have, but has an open heart to listen. And I've been able to talk to Danielle definitely and never feel judged or feel like she doesn't, at least is open to understanding me. So that's Danielle.
That was good. She's good at listening. So
she'll tell you, we talk a lot. A lot of athletes talk a lot.
Thank you. That was so flattering. I really appreciate that, Curtis. And thank you guys for having me on. I'm happy to be here.
Excellent. So tell us, I know Curtis just gave you a little build up, a little bit about a little bit more about what you do. And then also kind of just, you've been hearing the conversation to this point, your general short description of how you are feeling going on with what's going on right now.
Yeah, sure. So I run an organization called Tackle What's Next, and we support athletes as they transition from sport into their next career or their next endeavor. We work with professional and collegiate athletes primarily, and as Curtis said, the majority of athletes we do interact with and come into contact with happen to be people of color. There's a lot of athletes out there that are doing amazing things. And so what we try to do not only is provide them resources, but give them a platform to share the great things that they're doing, whether it's in the community or in their business world, creating companies, building career paths in large firms, and just genuinely succeeding outside of sports. And so that's my background. As Curtis said, I've done a lot of charity work in my past, and specifically with athletes, helping them build foundations, helping them build movements and initiatives, and joining to different cultural experiences around the world. Here as well as here in the country. Yeah. So I mean, again, I've been listening to this whole conversation, and I've gotten personally a lot out of it, and even been able to. I don't know if you guys could see me backstage nodding along to some of the things you were saying, but as somebody who doesn't have these kinds of experiences every day, it's been an exhausting, I think, couple of days for me. And I say that full well knowing that people have lived with this exhaustion their entire lives. And so I think that this has been an eye-opening experience for me. Like Curtis said, this is not something that I wasn't aware of or wasn't involved with. And I wasn't ignorant to the fact that these things were happening, but I think I finally fully stepped into, I think this past week, as many people have, the actual reality of the fact that like we have to step up as people that haven't experienced this and join this conversation for real. We can't just share on social media. We can't just push things out and use a hashtag, but we actually have to talk to people about it. And I love that you guys are talking about getting uncomfortable, because I think that's really the key, is like we have to be able to have these conversations. And I have talked to people, in my life and in my social circles about how they're feeling and like, what can I do? Like, what do you want me to do? And like, I hope I have never made you feel uncomfortable. Is there something that I can do better? Can I educate my own family, my own friends that might not be informed? And so I appreciate you guys just being honest and sharing your experiences and how you've been feeling. And I would just say, I know that I have a lot to do in my own life and in my own social circles to really be an advocate, as I have thought that I've been. I think getting better and continuing to listen and have conversations is really important.
Gotcha. And I think one of the things that hopefully you can take from this is also not just being an advocate, but also explaining what you're learning, that you spreading the conversation of you need to be uncomfortable in order to create change. And I think we'll still talk a little bit more about the idea of self-responsibility is different than fault. But I do, since you're on and you deal with a lot of athletes, there are some comments on the side that I do want to acknowledge. That I want to come back to. David asked the question, problem is he's had people saying that he's racist because he cares more about property and items over a black man being killed, which is far from the truth. It's just it's about how to properly have the conversation. And Victor followed up with, does it disturb you when we drop bombs in other countries to make points? Rioting is not pretty. Wish war never happens. However, sometimes it's necessary able to make a change. So that's an educated person also saying, I'm seeing the power of riots, which is also dangerous. But I do want to talk about that. So that's probably going to be the next thing we talk about. But since we have you right now, I do want to talk about a lot of the posts I see right now saying, and everybody here, see, if we were to listen to Kaepernick, we wouldn't be in this mess right now. Kaepernick, you had a problem with him before, and I want to be uncomfortable in this conversation. I'm not a fan of Kaepernick. I don't believe his movement was built on what it takes to change. So when I talk to people about anything they do in life, the most important thing is a plan and structure, and the importance of seizing a moment. Kaepernick was a wealthy black man that was raised in a white family, that was talented, started to no longer be talented, was no longer relevant-ish in his sport, and then is somebody that did not donate, did not give, did not do anything out of his own pocket until he was forced after his message came out. He didn't kneel the first game. He sat on the bench, and he was quickly corrected on how terrible that was, and he made a slight shift. And he was the guy that had policeman pigs for socks a month before. Now, did he have a point? Yes. Was he the right person to make that point? It's not for me to say in quotes, but technically people tell me you can't tell people how to protest. Agreed. I can't tell them how to protest, but I can tell them what the protest does to me and how it makes me feel. And what that protest, in my opinion, did was it separated people more. The people that already agreed with how severe police brutality was, they were already there. They went further to one side. And then the people that were like, I think, most cops are pretty good dudes. Like, I think it's just 1 out of 100. And this movement, you're not the right person. You're telling people that voting doesn't matter. You didn't vote yourself and you do this. It shifted people. So I think that the concept of his structure, the way that his platform was built to be a failure because there was no structure. It was just like, it seemed loosey-goosey. Whereas at the same token, what we have an opportunity with George Floyd is when you've got 99% of the population all in one direction wanting to help you, it's got so much more power, and we can't lose it to the danger and the violence and the riots. We have to seize the message. So when I see people bringing Kaepernick back up, I'm looking to the future. I'm not looking to the past. And I don't think what he did was relevant anymore, nor should you be shaming people for disliking Kaepernick. Like I just, that bothers me because it takes away from the focus of what we can do right now. So if anybody wants to reply to that, let me know.
I'll jump in really quick. And really quick, just to change that narrative a little bit. He was still relevant in the NFL. He had over 2,000 passing yards, 16 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, and like 2 rushing touchdowns with almost 500 yards. And that's only playing 12 games. So the relevancy, he was relevant. The year or two before he went to the Super Bowl, we were actually there when crappy Baltimore won that championship. Don't say anything, Danielle. But we were there. His talent was there. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into the NFL to make your stats, and I don't want to go down the road of stats. We'll see how Tom Brady does. Suck it. And it's to the point that he was relevant. I mean, the media, I will say on this one, the media took it and ran with it. And I will agree with you at one point, Anthony, he did not know what he was going to do. But at the same time, we see that now where people have no idea what to do. And I can't fault him for not at that time, at that moment, for not knowing what to do, because he's like, I don't know what to do. So I'm just going to sit here. Now, what I did like is when a veteran challenged him and said it's more honorable to kneel, which it is honorable to kneel because you're showing that you're kneeling. I still don't understand what people don't understand kneeling, and not just for that, that's with him, but in general. He knelt because a veteran told him that's how you honor me. Because he did fight for his right to not like to see the treatment of his people. And of course, he was adopted, which is not easy itself. Just because you do grow up in a white family doesn't mean you enjoy all the perks of being white. And I say perks as in that's what, some people are saying. And again, like with the systemic racism and different things that people will endure, he does have black in him, as we can see in his hair and his skin color. So he did it has probably gotten some of those things to him. But at the same time, I look at it as, and I've had a lot of conversations with that because of a lot of people who are on both sides. And they go, well, Curtis, you're a good person, which I don't know what quantifies me for a good person outside of me trying to help people. But at the same time, what do you think? Is this right? And I tell them every single time. What I don't want to say is, I believe he has the right to protest, but I don't agree with him on how he's doing it, because it doesn't matter if I think how he's doing it or not is right, because he wasn't doing anything violent. And as he started that movement, I followed that movement. I really wanted to see, what is he going to do? Is he going to back up? Is he going to sell out and say, okay, I'll shut up. I got to get my job back. I got to get this money. Because he did. He's still not in the league. And no offense, he's still better than a lot of quarterbacks in the league. And I don't want to name names of quarterbacks that I'm like, how are you still in the league? Because, again, that's wrong to them. And I'm not an NFL player, so I don't have a right to call these guys bum scrubs or not good. But at the same time, I look at it and I go, okay, this guy's been donating millions of dollars to the people. He's been creating programs for young girls and young people of color to find better, do better. And he's been doing a lot in the community that people have not been looking at, because he has not been out there talking about it all the time. And that he does not go do these things to talk about it. And so for me, I look at it and I go, this is awesome, because this man is not asking, look at me, I'm doing these things that you were hating on me on because I was kneeling this whole time. And I'm out here trying to do education. I'm out here trying to help
but you're talking about the same guy that brought his own press conference. So I'm watching some of the comments.
But hold on. The press conference at the football thing. That's I'm not talking about that. That's football. I'm talking about what he's been doing. But
why isn't he sharing the stuff that matters, what he's doing with the kids, which is, again, all after the fact. So my question goes back to the one thing I said, take away his relevancy. What is the purpose? I'm going to ask Aaron. Aaron, what is the purpose of a protest? Why do people protest?
You're protesting to be heard in some kind of way. That's why you protest. As a child, you're hungry, you throw a tantrum because you're hungry, you need food, and you don't know how to communicate that. On our most basic level, we are animals. We are primal. The only thing that separates us from animals is a code, is an ethic, is values, is morals, is having these standards and principles. And with what you just asked about protest, we are emotional creatures. We get into conversations, we get into arguments, we say things that we don't necessarily mean. We come back and we apologize. The problem with people that have a bigger platform is the execution. Athletes are extremely emotional. That's why they're great at what they do. Actors, musicians, they get up on their stages and they have their acceptance speeches. And a lot of the time, they will pose a powerful message. But again, it comes down to the execution. We are not in a place that we can just make an emotional statement and not have a plan for the execution. And that is what happens. And it kind of goes back into what Dex was saying about segmentation with certain things, is that I understand what Kaepernick was doing. I do understand that he was trying to make a statement for what he believed was right. But there needed to be a follow-up to that of what this means to me and how you guys want to interpret it. When it's just up and free for interpretation, you're going to take it and run that way. I'm going to take it and run that way. And whoever looks at me and values my opinions is going to go on my front. Whoever values you is going to go on your front. But the thing that it comes back to me about is that he did try to do something, but it is about the execution. We can protest, but we have to know who is protesting correctly and who is protesting / writing incorrectly. We had leaders. We had people like Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. And we had the Black Panthers. We had certain people that led in different ways, but they were able to there was a direction to it. And there was where we're trying to go and what we're trying to accomplish. And I think that is what is so lacking right now, is what are we trying to accomplish? And it can't be general, that Black Lives Matter or that we're all made equal. No, that's not what it's about. It comes back to human nature and how we treat each other, no matter how much money we make, no matter where we live or where we were raised. It's the example that we're setting, not just for those people that are older than us, not just for those people that are in our same circle, but also for the people that are younger than us. Your parents may have influenced you in such a dramatic way, but it was probably your neighbor Frank or Ted at church or your football coach that had an exponential amount of impact on you that changed your life. And that is what is so lacking right now, is that people are taking social media and these things that they're seeing in the media, and they are giving this value. They are creating this currency for the things that they should not be giving currency to. The riots, yes, they're happening. People breaking into stores, yes, it's happening. But me judging you or talking to you and saying to you, well, why do you care more about that and not about this? It's not that people don't care about that or care about this. It may be about how it's affecting them personally. They may be entrepreneurs. They may be store owners. They may have worked their whole life or something like that. And yes, Target is a big company, or this company is a small company. Like, neither of those, it doesn't matter. You're still damaging and taking away from something else that someone else created. So instead of going, you're wrong for that, or you're an idiot for that, it's the question of, why do you feel that way? Help me understand why this is more important to you than why this is more important to you. And then you can get to an understanding together to be able to move forward and make these rational decisions.
Yeah, and I just want to chime back in when we're talking about Colin Kaepernick and the fact that he didn't have a plan and he didn't necessarily have that execution piece that you just talked about, Aaron. I think we forget that just because somebody has a platform doesn't mean that they've been educated on how to use that platform effectively. And I think especially when you are an athlete and you have people looking up to you, there is pressure to say something, to do something. And there's pressure not only from the people that look up to you, but from friends, from family, from community members that say, well, they won't listen to me, but maybe they'll listen to you because you are where you are. And so I want to say, like, did Colin Kaepernick make mistakes? Oh, absolutely. And I'm sure he'd be the first to tell you, like, yes. Did I wear socks that were offensive to police and families of police? Yes. That's not great. And many people use that as an excuse to then dismiss all the good that he's done. And so I would just say we have to give people that same opportunity that we would want to be able to forgive our mistakes and for the things that maybe he was ignorant when he wore those socks. He thought it was something that was funny or cool. I don't know. I don't know why he wore them. I don't know if he's ever come out and said why he wore them. But to then negate all of the good things that he's done and that he's created this conversation, as divisive as it might be, he's created this conversation. He's had people talk about this. He made the biggest sports league in the world come out basically and make statements and make conversation about this and stand in a certain position. Now, they did not handle that well at all from my perspective, just did not do it well. And I think the people on both sides could probably say really a lack of leadership, to Aaron's point there, in terms of execution. But to say that all of the good that Kaepernick is now doing is negated because of the mistakes he's made or because he's grown and learned, I think we all need to think about that. Just as Aaron was saying, we need to come together and say, okay, maybe there is some way to connect to why did he do this? And maybe I can connect to that reason and then say, okay, why do I disagree? And how do I think it could be done better? Okay, no one's saying you have to go out and buy a Kaepernick jersey and donate to his fund, but maybe there's a way to appreciate the point he's trying to make and the awareness he's trying to bring, and then say, I disagree with how he did it, but I agree with his point. I agree with the message he's trying to send, and I'm going to support that in my own way. And so I think we just have to be careful with identifying people by their mistakes, because as a white person, like, I'm not going to say the right thing all the time, and I'm not going to necessarily come out and say what people want me to say or think something. Every time I talk to somebody about this, I learn that I've done something offensive in a really, really minor way that I didn't know I was doing. It's just subconscious, it's bias. And so I think when you look at somebody like an athlete that's on a public platform, you also need to go, okay, well, what did he not know? And we have to be forgiving of them, because if we're hating on or saying that Colin can't do something because of a mistake that he made and what socks he wore, you're not going to open the conversation for people that aren't part of the movement already to join in, because they're going to be afraid that someone's going to scroll through their tweets and see that they sent a joke or something offensive, and it's going to be
10 years ago, 15 years ago. And
I'm not saying that's good. Like, you shouldn't be tweeting that. But at the same time, like, it brings up all those conversations of, like, are we letting that define their future and what all the good that they are doing?
And we forget that we are imperfect as humans. We got and I want to come back to the point that you brought up, but like Jimmy Fallon today is profusely apologizing for wearing blackface in the year 2000 during a Saturday Night Live sketch. If at the time it was considered humor and considered funny, we all change as people, our society changes, and Kaepernick has changed. And I want to be very clear when I make my statement that I disagreed with Kaepernick's protest, I actually always talk about him like, yeah, he's doing a lot of great stuff. And I wish that he talked more about the great stuff that he's now doing after the fact, because he is millions of dollars on a career essentially being over in the NFL, potentially still having whatever, but he has gotten paid from Nike. He's donated a lot of that money. He's gotten the settlement. He's donated a lot of that money. So he is doing good. But I'm watching, this is the topic that I was interested in. I'm watching people's comments on the side, and they're interjecting. So Aaron, you talked about what a protest meant, and it is to create a conversation. At the same time, what I've always talked about is when the conversation, the next step from the conversation is action. And if it is a dividing factor, the point of a protest is typically to change something. So I am not ever saying, and some people do, but I'm not ever saying Colin Kaepernick should not have done that. Should have done it. That's not the right way to protest. I'm saying the way his protest showed me, and it wasn't even about how I felt. It was about how I watched our country divide. And it is during the national anthem. And you know what? There is a lot of military people that spoke out and said, I'm not offended. We fight for those freedoms so he could do that. However, you're forgetting about the other 50% of the military or more, white or black, because I've heard both say it, both get upset about it, that they felt as though it was not the right way to address it. Maybe before the game, whatever it might be. But the ultimate goal of a protest is to create change. And actually, Rico Williams just tuned in, and him and I have had a long discussion about Kaepernick back when this all happened. He's like, Anthony, you cannot tell people how to protest, and I'm not. I am telling you, I'm offering my advice of what it did and how it reflects on people. Now, Danielle, we should not forget about all the good that he does. That should be brought up first. And this is all talking about the fact that we see people posting, why didn't we listen to Kaepernick in the first place? It's not you shouldn't be blaming people for not listening. You should say, all right, that didn't work. Something was wrong with that. I'm glad he's doing good. Let's not even talk about that. Let's focus on now. Let's stop the rioting. We get it. We get that everything's that they're in pain. We're angry. There's more awareness than we've ever had. We've got the first time in a long time that there is a flat visual of a man being murdered by a police officer. Let's go from here. Why are we bringing up something that, to me, although creating conversation, could have been part of the escalation, if you want to play devil's advocate, could be part of the escalation in the division of why we are still here today. So yes, he created a conversation, but there is a chance that that conversation has led us to more vitriol, more separation, more division. So why are we still bringing it up? Don't blame people for disagreeing with what he did then.
It's still being brought up because you take different tactics to accomplish a goal. If I have to speak for myself, as an actor, I have my want, my motivation. What do I want in this scene? What is my motivation in this scene? And I don't just play one note to accomplish that. The great actors, they use a bunch of different tactics to accomplish that. The reason that it's being brought up still is that Black people have tried a number of different ways to protest, and they've all gone, I'm not going to say unrecognized, they've all gone without follow through of what was trying to happen. You go back to, and I know this is circling around, but you go back to Black Wall Street, people bring that up, and it's like, you guys wanted segregation. We pieced out, we started our own thing, but that wasn't good enough. We kneeled, that wasn't good enough. So all of these things are coming full circle because it's showing you the chalice that we have filled up, and we're saying, what do we do? How do we get you to listen to us? How do we make change? Do I have to break something? Do I have to talk to you? Do I have to hug someone? What do I have to do? And when you get to a certain point of helplessness, you just react. You stop thinking and you just start reacting. That is human nature. That is fight or flight. That is still in our being. And that is why it's continuing to get brought up, because it's like, what has to be done for there to be change?
I'm saying this is it. I'm saying this is that moment where we have an opportunity, because it takes an army, it takes a village to move a mountain. It takes just blatant faith, and it takes everybody to work together. So when you have that moment, you have to seize it. I'm saying Kaepernick didn't have that moment. So this moment of potential unity can't be lost. And part of it is the concept of having an open mind so you don't want to turn people off. So if like, for example, David brought up earlier, and we've commented a little bit on it, I'm not racist because I care about property. He's not. And people have a different sense of being, and he could still. I'm concerned for. I know people's businesses that have gotten burnt down. I was almost at a restaurant that was almost destroyed in Charleston the night that it happened, like the first night of the riots. There is nobody that's wrong right now, as long as people aren't in denial. So the way that we continue on with the conversation is letting people also see what's going on, informing them of truth, and also not fighting them for every opinion they have. I don't want to say that I'm saying Kaepernick was wrong. I'm saying Kaepernick's protest did not work as planned because it created a potential. Sometimes things don't work. It created a potential for a narrative that was, whether it's spun by the media or spun by outspoken voices, that caused people to separate more. So
yeah, I really want to say really quick too. One thing I think we always miss out, and I'm not a history buff, I'm not a historian or whatever, but I do like to read history sometimes, because a lot of times people will say, I've never seen this. This is the first, this has been something that is so crazy that 100 years ago Sunday, almost 100 years ago Sunday, was the Black Wall Street Massacre. Over 300 black people died, right? 300 black people died. They weren't doing anything. White people flew over with planes, threw Molotov bombs down, blew up, shot, killed a lot of people. And also 100 years ago, there was a pandemic. And 100 years later, with technology, education, and all of these things going on, there's still people dying, and there's still a pandemic, because the problem that we don't do in this country and all around the world, honestly, it's the world, because we've all traveled the world, been blessed to be able to do that. And I think that's one of the best things you can do. But I will say, there's a problem in this country. And I didn't realize this problem until I had to go to South Africa. And I got back to America, and something that really hit me was that people think they were originally the owners of this land. People think America was started and it was so beautiful, and the Constitution's perfect, and our forefathers, and I have had people tell me, Curtis, don't you wish we could go back to when the forefathers started America? I said, no, I would have been a slave.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have been my friend, and you as a woman wouldn't have been able to vote or wouldn't have had any say. And another thing, if you weren't a land-owning white person, a male, you weren't going to vote and didn't have a voice. So when I tell people that, and I've had some people try to justify the massacre and the genocide. This genocide of the indigenous people in America. 15 million genocide. People died genocide. I don't celebrate Columbus Day. I don't celebrate Thanksgiving. I celebrate as with family and giving thanks for being a family. And we go out and help people and use that to make it positive. But I have indigenous roots in my family. And there's only two cultures in this entire country that land was stolen, and it was stolen from them in such a way, and society turned and it's the funniest thing I tell. And I this is when I started calling people out on what they say, because when people say, oh, Curtis, you're an Indian giver, I said, there's no freaking way I can be an Indian giver, because Indians never gave anything and took it back. The only people that came and did that were Europeans. That came over, took it, gave it back to you, and then took it again, and then gave you a little bit and say, look, I'm being nice. And this is the thing that people forget. And unfortunately, the only other culture in this entire country are black people, because they were stolen. They didn't steal the land. The Europeans didn't steal land from black people, which they did, because Africa, but they stole the black people themselves and brought them to this land. And so one thing that people don't understand, and it's very, very uncomfortable. And they don't, Curtis, I don't want to talk about slavery. Slavery's been over. We're out of that. No, that is the beginning. The beginning of America has to be realized, that we started on massacre and genocide in America. We're a beautiful country now. I am thankful that I live here. But I will say this. We started on massacre. We started on genocide, and looking at one thing that black people, a lot of black people, and this explains for the Kaepernick part, agreed with Kaepernick kneeling at the Star Spangled Banner, because it was written by a slave owner that at that time black people were not free. July 4th is not black people's freedom. It's not, because black people were still slaves when July 4th started. When they signed the independence, and they signed it, when we got American independence, right? It was still slavery in America, and black people were not seen as human beings. Not even if it was human, they were not seen as equal human beings. So when they put that line in that Constitution, that was lying. And this is the thing that I try to help people understand. I don't want to get too excited, but I let people know, guys, America has its problems. Guys, we don't own this land. We are now living in this land because of what they did. And if we look at it that way, we will go from this I'm entitled. I'm an American. This is my land. Why is he kneeling on the Star Spangled Banner? Because his people, part of his people at that time weren't free. So black people's true freedom is what we celebrate Juneteenth. Because that's not even the day black people were free. That's when they finally found out. This is months after the Civil War. There was no Twitter. Black people, you're free. They didn't know. There's no Facebook group that we free now. Yo, what up? Yo, coming down, right? There was none of that. There was none of that. That was until these Union soldiers came down. And again, the Union wasn't perfect. Don't get me wrong, because they changed it around. But they came down and finally told black people in Texas and Memphis they were free. And I will tell you this, I was ignorant to the fact until about 5 years ago. I went to Memphis, Tennessee, and the first time I ever celebrated Juneteenth was that time. And I was like, how in the world, me being an educated black man, not know that this happened? How did I not know about Black Wall Street? How did I not know about the 300 people that died in bombings in Birmingham, Alabama, that were started by white men?
How many years ago is that?
Terrorism. It was long, much more than 20. It's back in the 60s or 50s.
That's not that long ago.
No, what I'm saying is how I didn't know that, right? And that's because history is not teaching us, because the history that they're trying to teach, the system, it goes back to the system. The system is so beautiful. It teaches us what they want us to know. It teaches us that we can call women this, that we tell women this, and men, as men, we treat women a certain way. As white people, you don't inherently mean to do it, but if the system has been in you so deep that you have no idea that it's there, because it's in black people too. Because I would question myself, am I black in high school because I didn't like hip hop, because I didn't sag my pants. But then I realized I started to buck that trend of, oh, you're not black enough. What makes me black enough? Because I had white people tell me that, oh man, he blacker than you. How is he blacker than me? Because he's a white guy. Well, he likes hip hop. That's not makes me black, because I speak correctly. I listen to gospel Christian music. I listen to punk rock. I listen to you look at all kind of music. But the point is, what I listen to and how it does not define who I am, because you want to automatically lump it all together. And like that's what Dex was saying that got me incensed was, I am a black man that is educated, that likes to speak correctly, that likes classical music, that drinks sparkling water, doesn't smoke blunts, doesn't wears pants. I don't say the N word. I don't like it. I don't do all that. That's me. But those things don't define me as a black man. How I am a black man, I'm a black man. And so what I like people to go back to is look at history. We always talk about this point right now. They should never ever have to be and this is not attacking you, Anthony, but there's a lot of people have said this. There should never ever be a perfect time because this man died. There's no way any of these guys should have died.
There shouldn't be.
Yeah,
but you can't change the way. You can't change the way people are, because I want to make sure Danielle talks about this too. But I noticed the comment that somebody said, when is the right time? Why is it? Oh, do you have a short window? I'm going to be a realist and I'm going to say, unfortunately, yes. Is that fair? Absolutely no. But just like if you're in a business deal, if you're in a sporting event, if you're in a game, an actual competition, whatever it might be, if you don't seize the opportunity, you lose. If you're trying to start a business and there's an opportunity that comes your way and you don't seize it, you lose. I'm half Jewish. After the Holocaust, there was a moment that the Jews, instead of, and unfortunately for the case we're talking, they didn't have the same systematic issues and racism and the things that they were educated. That was their key. They were a little bit more educated than we have allowed the general Black public to be, because of the issues in the school systems and all these different things. So fact is, when you do have that moment, and there was a comment by, I think, Rico that said, if everybody's at the dinner table, or Sunday dinner, that's when you hash out all your issues. It's uncomfortable. It's ugly. It could be a fight. But fact is, this is that time. So yes, it's not fair. I hate to say that, but in life, things aren't fair. And I don't want to, it's not an oppressive term. It's fact is, this is the time to seize an opportunity. It's a short window until the next unfortunate Black man is killed on camera. And yes, Will Smith did say, he goes, Black people aren't all of a sudden getting killed. It's doing it on camera now. So yes, I'm saying the importance in seizing this opportunity, as bad as that sounds, it should be very important. And then Danielle, I want to go to you. Before then, we need a little comic relief because Matt Troyer corrected you, Curtis. Abraham Lincoln did in fact send a tweet to tell the slaves that they were free. So you might have missed that. So
Hey, bro, my battery died.
No, I mean, I think you guys hit the nail on the head with just the importance on educating yourself, because we're not, as you guys brought up earlier, like the things that are coming to us aren't necessarily what's true and what actually happened. And so you actually need to do your digging. Like, I am a history buff. I love history. I watch the History Channel all the time, and I really do go after my own research. I want to know what happened, because for me, it's not enough for somebody to tell me that this is why this war started, or to read it in a textbook. I want to hear from those people that have spent their lives studying this, that have made their career learning everything there is to know about this time period or this person. I watch the documentaries on former presidents, and I think one of the most important things we have to remember is everyone says, like, oh my God, the world is so crazy now. Like, now is such a scary time to be alive. And we have to remember that, like you said earlier, Curtis, like, there's never been an amazing, perfect time to be alive as a human. Like, 100 years ago, I wouldn't have this platform. None of us would have this platform. We'd be completely, dominated by white men here. And I think that's something to say, is like, we have evolved so much, and we have to take that and say, what more can we do? What more can we do? But we also do have to look back and say, look, what can we learn from these systems as they were created? And so you need to go out and find this information. Like, why was the Civil War started? Why did we fight? Was it because of states' rights, or was it because of a huge economic gain in the South by owning people? Like, you have to look that up, and there's going to be disagreements, right? But at the same time, like, if you don't do that work and you don't do that education, it's going to be hard to have those really intense conversations. Because if you are talking to somebody like Curtis that's bringing up things that you haven't even heard of, you're going to start to be like, well, whoa, I don't know about that. Like, I didn't know that was a thing. I'm sorry, but we should all know about that. And we can't just leave it up to the school systems and the government to teach us what we need to know about our fellow people. And I love that you brought up the Native American community, because, yeah, if anybody has a right to be pissed off about, genocide and everything, it's the Native American community. I mean, it annihilated. I mean, I live in Maryland, and I don't know any area or part of the town where it's a majority Native American community. And I've heard that there's 300 tribes here, and that's crazy to me. And I think that's something too that we need to be more aware of, is like, this isn't necessarily the time to start bringing up every single person that's ever been offended, or group that's ever been prosecuted or ever been persecuted. But at the same time, like, we have to be aware of our own ignorance in certain areas, and know that, like, yes, while we all might be getting educated on this movement and how we can help Black people and avoid police brutality and all of these really good things, we also have to say, like, it doesn't stop there, right? We have to keep going, because at the same time, we have to look behind us and say, look, these are the reasons why we're here. And maybe we're here because of 4 years ago, Kaepernick knelt down and started this dialogue. Like, if he hadn't done that, would we be in this position we are today? We don't know, but he did, and we are. And so I think that's important too, is like, all of these moments have been building up to where we are right now. And I think, to what Aaron said and to what you said, Anthony, it's like, we need to come up with, how can we get people to help, and what's going to be the change now that's actually going to stick, right? What can we help people do that want to help but feel helpless, or don't know how to contribute, or don't know how to join the conversation? What is the plan we're telling them? Because I think you can look back all you want, you can complain, you can tweet, you can post, but, like, what's going to make that change? And unfortunately, like, I don't want to wait until the next time somebody has to die for us to start talking about this again. Like, that's not okay. And I think that's half the reason why you're seeing violence happen right now, is people are fed up. They don't want to wait for somebody else to die to bring this back up to the news and into the media landscape. But I think we as individuals have to do a better job of figuring out, like, what can I do? What change can I make? And Like,
I think,
how do we execute that as a group?
So I think to starting point again, I think we are in an awareness phase, and I think part of it is the idea of how do we get the riots to stop. And I don't know. I think that's hard because the protests need to still go on in a certain way. I liked the idea of the all white protests. There's a lot of white people that believe in this change. Let's have a day where it's like, oh, black people stay home. We got you. And let's see if the same shit ensues. But again, with the educational purposes, I think right now a lot of it is education. As we're realizing, and Curtis has taught me a lot, I do a lot of historical research. I didn't know about Juneteenth either until about 3 or 4 years ago. There was a question earlier, why do we not understand and Matt, I want to get to what I think it was Matt that said something, or maybe Jason, I want to get to something right on this point. But the history books were wrong. Why were they written wrong? Because it benefited them to control their narrative, which is what we're seeing out of the media now. So this is where, as Google can be dangerous for news, Google can be very powerful to learn about Black history, because fact is we didn't learn it. So in terms of systematic racism, it is a little different than the Jews. And I know my mom's actually commenting on that. But so here, but the big issue is this: when it comes to education, Danielle, and when it comes to letting people know, the more I've educated myself, I'm not a fan of the term white privilege. I'm learning to get over that concept because I was raised in poverty levels with a handicapped father, with zero, all the different things that from a separated family that typically are pinned on the underprivileged Black community. But there is a difference. I could have been poor and still walked into a place and not had certain fears. So do I consider I used to say, do I have certain privileges? Yes, but I don't believe in white privilege. I'm changing my thought process on that. I'm actually saying it's quite the opposite. My life did not come from privilege. I did not have privilege as an opportunity in my life. Did I have the element of white privilege? Yes, I did.
You had to look. You had to look.
So I'm tan right now. But fact is, I have that. So I do understand. I'm learning that there's a difference. So getting people's minds changed is going to take an idea of open-mindedness. And I want to get to you in a second, Aaron. But the whole concept is this: what can we do right now is to stop tripping over dollars for pennies. Using that phrase, stop caring about the little things. So there was a comment that talked about, well, some Black people like to be referred to as African American. Likewise, I've been told people like to be referred to as Black. They're like, I didn't come from Africa. Honestly, at this point, there's a dead Black man at the hand of the police. Who gives a baker's fuck? What term works? Because it doesn't work for everybody. So to start the conversation with that, it automatically puts the person you're having the discussion with on the defensive. So say you're having a conversation with a guy that's trying to learn, a white dude that maybe is not educated on Black history properly, and you go up to him and he's like, so what is it like with like the Black guys like you? Well, it's African Americans. You've immediately lost his ear. Stop worrying about the little things. And I'm going to read this. I want to read this post I saw from somebody I don't even know, but it's an issue of what's going on in social media. And then Aaron, I know you want to say something, so hold on. So this woman that I don't really know, I have to put down my phone for the day. I know nobody cares. But there's so much hate circulating, and it's very disheartening. I say I support you. I'm attacked because I didn't say it how you wanted me to. I say I want justice. I'm attacked because I didn't say how you wanted me to. I have an opinion. I'm attacked because I didn't say it how you wanted me to. I say I'm outraged. I'm attacked because I didn't say it how you wanted me to. I say I'm part of a police family and I do back the blue, and I'm automatically racist and don't want justice. I say nothing and I'm attacked because I'm being complacent. There's so much division even from people on the same side. There needs to be some form of unity, and it is part of the power in words and communication and allowing people to say things a little bit different. I'm not saying somebody could drop the N-word during a conversation, but I'm saying you have to have an open mind when you start the conversation, that not everybody's going to believe the same way. And you have to teach them about systematic racism. You have to teach them things that I've had to learn on my own about. Somebody mentioned they lived in a poor family in Iowa and they were white, but what I saw it on the side. I've learned things about the way that we as a country, even during Democratic, Republican, it didn't matter what leaders, we've changed the voting lines. We've altered the way the country looks so that in the end, their voices, even if they vote, their percentages don't matter because they're part of a predominantly white or predominantly, if the Black voice doesn't matter here, they do it there. So they were never even allowed there, even though they finally got to cast a vote, it didn't matter. And then you look at it from the terms of education. Yes, poor white families didn't have the same didn't have a great education either. However, they had a little bit more freedom to leave where they were. We pocketed Black people into certain areas of a city, and we forced them to have the education that was put forth. So there is levels of systematic racism that even educated white people may not understand. And honestly, a lot of educated Black people don't even understand why they've been oppressed either. So teaching that concept allows people to have a little bit more of an open mind on what's really important, which is how do we change it? 20 years of education, 20 years of policy, and everybody coming together and seizing moments that are unfortunate and uncomfortable, but like this. Aaron, go ahead.
I love what Jason just wrote there, where he said, Anthony, you can't change someone's perspective until you start a relationship with that person.
Really quick too. Jason's a good friend of mine, and he and I have gone back and forth way before this he also teaches in the inner city, actually up in Minneapolis. So he has definitely been, I will say, a person that has been open to ask questions. And like you're saying, Anthony, I work with him also, so I know him. But it's also of me being as a Black person to make sure I am a good friend to be able to help him understand and give him a safe place to ask those questions. Go ahead. Sorry, Aaron.
Yeah, you're good. I have 3 things that I want to touch on real quick. So talking about the timeline and when is it right? Is there a right time? I personally believe that people think life is linear. Right? What happened in the past, it's not going to affect me, or it's in the past or whatever. I disagree with the fact that life is linear. I believe that life is completely circular, and we're going to encounter the same exact things repeatedly. But it's us wising up, getting smarter, educating ourselves to prepare ourselves for the next time we're in that situation, to be able to handle that situation differently. Whether it's Colin Kaepernick kneeling, or it's the protest with Martin Luther King Jr., or it's Rosa Parks, or whatever it is, these are all the exact same thing. Whether or not it's getting better or getting worse, it's the exact same thing. It's just the perspective that you're looking at it.
I didn't think about that.
All of this stuff, I hate to say, but all of this is going to happen again. The only way to change it and to make a bigger impact in the future is to know how we dealt with it before and make the adjustments and the changes to deal with it in the future. To put some brevity to this, I bring up this movie all the time. Lion King is one of my favorite movies, right? Simba got rocked.
Coming of age.
Like, Rafiki rocked Simba with that staff multiple times until he ducked. Because he had to learn and he had to adapt and he had to make that adjustment. And when I say the word adapt, I'm not saying like get used to it. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying you have to know this is going to happen again. So that's why we have to take this time to be able to figure out how to make these changes. And I think this leads us into the next quick thing I want to talk about is references. I don't know if they do this in schools anymore, but when you wrote a book report, you had to have all these different references. You couldn't just have one reference. It's not just Google. It's not just Instagram. Yeah. It's not just, I watched Trevor Noah and I listened to what he says. It's references. And you make that face, Andy. I mean, that's a thing. Like people.
No, I know that. I'd say like that's. I'm agreeing with you. It's like there's so many more. There's more sources. That's the thing. Like it cannot be one place.
Correct. But it's
APA formatting. I'm sorry. That's a good one.
But it's again, it's people being able to use multiple references. Do you go buy a car and you just buy that one car? Do you go buy a house and you just buy that one house? Why are you making these life decisions? Why do you think you're going to be able to make these big life decisions without references? So that's a big thing, which leads me into the last point that you were saying about privilege, Anthony. And I've been going back and forth with this too. And I think this could be inflammatory for some people, but white privilege is a thing. maybe attention deficit disorder is a thing. For me, I don't believe that those things should be stifled with pills or you've got white privilege or this and the other. I think they need to be harnessed and directed. If a kid is all over the place and he's got this attention, something is not keeping his attention. What can you do? Is he a creative person? Does he need, what stimulation does he need to keep him entertained? Same thing with privilege. White privilege is what we're talking about, but we all have a privilege as humans, right? I may be privileged to be extremely creative. An athlete may be privileged to be 6'7" and be able to dunk a basketball. We all have some kind of privilege, but it's how we're using that. And that's where I get so frustrated is people are trying to stifle certain things like, oh, you're white privilege this or white privilege that. Yes, they fucking have it. It's a thing. Like, it is a thing. But instead of stifling it, help them to direct it. Help them to have a conversation about how to use it. How do you use that responsibility? How do you use that power? How do you use to shape it? Let other people help you in order to create that path. So when I hear the word white privilege, or I hear Black Lives Matter, I think those are privileges. Those are things that other people in other countries don't have. And instead of it being something that we stifle, we need to be able to direct it in order to make us better. Money can be an absolutely terrible thing, but if we use it the right way, it takes us somewhere. And this applies to a lot of different concepts, but it's ultimately it's about knowing that things will happen again, being able to manage our resources and our references of what we did last time and how we do it better, and being able to use that information to direct the actions of where we're going as a country and how we're going to shape the future.
I like what you just said, and on top of it, the idea of white privilege, because here's the deal. White, just the same way you can't speak on other people's lives, it's almost allowing white people to speak on their own. Look, I had white privilege in this instance, but this is how we can change it. When it's used as an argumentative tactic, it gets people nowhere. When somebody goes, you don't understand because you had white privilege, go. So there's something different to white privilege. You may not understand this, so let me try to explain it. But when you immediately give up on an argument and say, you don't get it, I'm out. You have white, it defeats the whole point of the conversation. There is there's a comment on the side. There is a little bit going back and forth, and I think we have enough to probably continue this conversation next week. And I'm sure there's going to be some things. But the one thing that while we're on the conversation and seeing what people talk about, we've got the question of Jews and Black experience. Should there be reparations for Black people? And at the same time, the question is, and I'm going to start off by disagreeing with this. When somebody says, well, why do they say remember the Holocaust and forget about slavery? I think the same people that say forget about slavery, depending on how it's used, are the people that aren't going to be change makers. They're not going to create change. They're probably the 1% that didn't give a shit about George Floyd being murdered. I don't think those are the people you have to convince. So getting rid of evil in our society is almost impossible in that small shred, but getting everybody to make the evil go away or essentially be a non-issue is the key here. So there is the concept, and I've seen Black people speak on it too, where a lot of Black leaders actually like, stop talking about slavery. They're not saying forget about it. They're saying let's start now and how can we make ourselves better. So I don't think anybody that actually has a heart or gives a shit or it would even be a part of the conversation is saying to forget about slavery. Now, comparing the two between slavery and the Black experience for the last 2,000 years and the Jewish experience, as a Jew, I'm going to tell you, the Jewish experience was bad. The Black experience, if you want to compare who's had it worse, is worse. It's been forever. there's because also white people and Jewish people could have hid out. They can blend in. Black people can't blend in with white people. So there is some negatives. I don't want to compare two shitty situations and say one's worse than the other. I don't think that's the whole, and I'm watching that on the side. That's part of the conversation that doesn't get anybody anywhere. It sucked for everybody. It sucked for me because of whatever happened in my childhood. It sucks for whatever Aaron had to go through. There was maybe a horrible breakup that Curtis went through that made him have to deal with shitty stuff. Like we have all had shitty things, each differently. Yeah, I know you only break up with the girls. I get it.
No.
Anyway, but I'm saying everybody has something different that they've dealt with. So I apologize, Rico. You need a new set of friends, or you need to find a way to educate them. I don't like the phrase "new set of friends." I don't know. Send them to me. Send them to your level-headed white friends that maybe could talk to them better. Or you phrase it like, "Yeah, I'll forget about it." When things change, I would love to forget about slavery. But things need to change. And honestly, my opinions on reparations have changed a little bit after we're seeing how easy it is to just dump thousands of dollars to each person's pocket. So I think there's different
millions of billions of dollars into big companies' pockets.
Yeah, that conversation should probably come back up. I don't disagree with that. I think if you want to start talking about actionable items, I think the idea of creating and it being monitored by full black leadership in politics, whoever is in positions of power in the political system that are black people or African Americans, whatever you would like me to say in this sense, I think them controlling a fund for small businesses would be huge and tremendous. How does that get brought up? That's a lobbying and policy issue that it needs to be a discussion that starts here and starts now and starts with people. But it's just finding a way. Rico, if it's not coming from your friends, just send them to me.
I will say Mark Cuban is doing some things like that for the minority businesses, which I love because he recognizes that, and he is not a black man, and he's not doing this for anybody's, thank you. He's just realizing this is a wrong and I need to try to make it right. I don't know if he's perfect, but everything else is like, I'm just saying, as being a small business owner and having to go through these PPP and EID and all this other stuff that they try to confuse you with. You don't have a bunch of lawyers and accountants. That is him, Magic Johnson, and a few others are trying to do that. It's very small, but still, it's people who are billionaires are like, no, I want to do my best to try to help you. So I don't want to keep prolong. I know we got a lot to go into next week with this, but I will want to say one thing. Everybody on the chat, like we see you all, like, look at each other's responses with an open mind. Just because you don't fully understand or you see it a certain way, you define it a certain way. Anthony and I don't agree on everything, but we still listen and we still understand. So I would hope you all are taking what we said and listening to each other. Read it, take it, and if you don't truly believe with it, just peacefully agree to disagree, and that's okay. That is okay.
Yep, I'm reading the last couple of comments.
As you do that, I want to throw something out there. We don't have to dive into it, but I just want to throw it out there as a point of information. I think I believe that there are a lot of people that are associating the policemen, and women with being racist. I think that is incorrect. I think visually, perceptively, you're looking at that uniform, knowing that you put your trust into that uniform, and that trust has been broken. And you're looking at that uniform, and that is making you say that the police are racist, say that the police are corrupt. But I believe that that that's not the situation, that they're not all like that. There are extremes to any situation. There are. So what I think is happening is I think people are looking at the police, they're looking at the police uniform, and they're wanting to act out against that uniform because of the perception or the mental block that they have now created. And I think it goes the same with white skin and with black skin and whatever skin. You're looking at that skin and you're looking at it as the cover to the book, and you're not figuring it out. And I think this is something it's a valuable lesson that I know I'm still learning, and I know a lot of people are still learning. It's that you get hurt when you put your 100% into something. And when you put your 100% trust into a badge, the people that are supposed to take care of you, and they break you, you lose that trust. But I don't believe that you need to stop trusting or stop believing. I believe that you have to take that time to heal, figure out what happened, not just in your own personal world, but what happened in their world, in order to make some kind of a difference. If I break up with a girl, why did we break up? What did I do wrong? What did she do wrong? It doesn't mean that we're bad people. We may have just been bad together. So I think a lot of people should make that division between the person that's wearing that uniform and the actual uniform itself. Hopefully that makes sense.
It does. So I'm gonna have each of you guys kind of do your own wrap, and then I'll finish it up. I do want to talk. There's Rico said to mention Megan's comment, and I think this goes a little bit back to what we said earlier in terms of we have to be careful. We need to let people be open-minded when they come to us. That's the way to create change. We also have to be careful and realize that everybody's going to have a different opinion. Megan, who I know very well, that probably has in my entire life one of the kindest hearts I have ever met, ever. I consider her family. Says, and her comment actually has a light point to it. I learned through history these things were wrong. And let me tell you that white privilege comment shouldn't be thrown around as much as it is. She's not saying it wrong. She's saying as much as it is, because that is wrong as well. It's also delimiting people for shades of skin that it has nothing to do with how they treat people in life. So sometimes the better the white person is in their regular life, the more offensive that comment could be, because that person could be doing so many things to help their community, white, black, purple, brown, doesn't matter. And they're getting slammed for asking a question and just saying it's white privilege. It can be an offensive point that causes the whole narrative and positivity to be lost. And that is the careful of white privilege. That's kind of what I said earlier, that could be a dangerous comment. I know Aaron alluded to that as well. The other one thing I want to reply to is in regards to if somebody would have just gotten and knocked over that cop. It didn't happen. Nobody actually did it. And honestly, that could have led to somebody else being killed. We know that if it's like, how could that situation have been diffused? I have no idea. So let's just pretend like this situation was meant to happen for us to come together, because there's nothing we could do to change that moment. Because I tell you, any of those people that were yelling at the police officer, young, black, male, female, they could have been killed just as easily with the firearm at that point. So if I were a white dude that came by, I would like to say I would vocally say as loud as I can, but at the same token, I know that in that situation of escalation, I'm putting myself at risk. So there's nothing that could have been changed in that moment except for how we react to it now. And at the end, once they talk, I'm going to talk some of the stuff. We didn't even talk about some of the facts behind police brutality and how some of those facts and those narratives are something we need to pay attention to. And also some of the things we need to realize there's intangibles, white on white crime, black on black crime, black on white crime, white on black crime, as well as police on white and black crime. Those numbers need to be understood and they can't be avoided. It's uncomfortable to hear it. When you discuss black on black crime, it all of a sudden starts an argument and starts a fight. It needs to be brought up, but understand the reasons behind it. So we're going to talk about that I honestly did not plan on this going for, I figured it'd be about this long. I figured 2 hours. I thought we'd get to everything, but I feel like hopefully.
And Danielle, thanks for staying in there with us for.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, Dave. I think a lot of people are this is helping, and that was the whole purpose. So I'm going to wrap it up at the end of this, but Danielle, go ahead and wrap yourself up on this one, and then we'll go to Curtis and Aaron.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me on. I want to just follow up with what you guys just said. I think it's really about communication and creating relationships with people. And and having that important dialogue and open-minded. I love that that's what you guys have been saying since the start of this conversation, because that's how things change. And I think, to your point, Aaron, and to your point, Anthony, we have to separate the individual from the system on both sides. So on both sides, there are systems in place and there are stereotypes at bay. And I think we need to separate those and make those relationships, because just like you said with the cops in the uniform, we're looking at a broken system that we need to fix. And even if there are police officers out there trying to fix that right now, it's not working. And so we, instead of blaming them, we need to go into the system and fix it. We need to find out how can we fix it. And I think the same thing applies to when you look at some of the groups of people that are, protesting and rioting right now. Instead of saying they're all bad people, they're destroying things, this is, whatever. Who are these people? Are they the Black Lives Matter groups? Who are they? Let's find out who they are, and let's create relationships with these different groups to find out who's coming to these protests. Who are they? Why are they here? And how can we have this dialogue? It's not yelling and screaming of, this is not our movement, this is their movement, I'm not with this group, I'm with this group. That's not going to change anything. We need to have those dialogues and come together and say, who are you? And let's have this, like Aaron said, like dialogue, like open dialogue, and create that relationship so that, just like you said, Anthony, you have to have that open-mindedness. So that's where I want to end it. I'm really excited to be here, and thanks for letting me be a part of this conversation.
Thanks for helping us tackle what's next, Danielle.
Thank you. Curtis.
Oh, I love Danielle.
Pun intended.
Curtis, go ahead.
All right, really quick. So this conversation has been amazing, and I am so glad, Anthony. Thank you for having this. Thank you for Aaron for mentioning this. I know we always have our own conversations, and I love talking to people that I can just let them know how I feel without them getting too upset, and them also let me know how they feel. And then we can be friends after, because that's life. And one thing I will bring up, I lost my grandmother 2 days before Christmas Eve past year. And I lost my grandfather 3 days before Thanksgiving a few years back. And both of them grew up. Grandfather was born in 1929, Great Depression. And he grew up in an era that, for Black people, it was almost impossible to be successful or to even see success because of, racism and all these things that happened. And even for my grandmother, who was didn't have a mother, and I didn't know these things until the funeral. And it's crazy. Again, you learn when major events happen. But there's one thing that I definitely learned from them, and I tell other people. My grandmother had to get college. She had to leave South Carolina and travel by bus to Boston every summer for 4 years just to get a degree, because they would not teach her in South Carolina. She also mentored over 400 women in her life, young women, on how to be strong women, because, again, she's a woman and had to fight two battles, not just being African-American or Black, but also being a woman in a male-dominated world, and taught the young women on how to do things. Also, she was a career teacher and a lot of other things. My grandfather was a veteran, and he also was one of the first Black principals in South Carolina. And he had to leave the state to go get his realtor license to come back and be able to sell houses in the state, in his community, because Black people at that time could not buy from white realtors. And I thought grandfather would have been rich because he sold over 40, 50 houses. The entire neighborhood where their house is now, he sold 90% of those houses to amazing Black families. And one thing that I asked him, why we're not rich? You should have made so much money. He said, I don't want to profit off of my own people when I'm just giving them the opportunity to do better. And so what I was tasked with by my uncles and aunts, the kids of my grandparents, at my grandfather's funeral and just at this funeral, was, what are you going to do? When they had less than you have, when they had less opportunities than you had, when there was a lot more racism, which, and then when there's even more blatant racism and other things holding them back, they did not let that stop them. And this is for white and Black, Latin and Asian, everybody. They did not let that stop them from getting educated, making a plan, in succeeding in their goal of making sure they were going to be the change what they wanted to see in the world. So that's one thing I just want to tell people is it doesn't matter, the systemic racism. It does matter, but I'm just saying, like, it's your mindset on how you want to react to it. And of course, get angry. Of course, exercise your feelings. And as men, don't ever hold that in. But don't let that stop you by saying, I don't know what to do. You are empowered with your brain. Go learn. Go ask questions. Be comfortable in your uncomfortableness, because that's the only way that this is going to change. We can't look to leaders because they'll get killed, and they killed them. We can't look to our parents because they don't always know. They only know what their parents know. We can look at each other and say, hey, I want to be a better man. I want to be a better woman. I want to be a better human. And that's what we have to do in this world today. So don't be scared. Ask your friends who are different color, different races, and educate yourself on culture, and just learn and be open, and don't take offense. We all have work to do. So that's all I got to say. And thank you again, Anthony. And thank you for everybody who's tuning in. And we still got 20 people. Y'all been on us 2 hours. That's the longest watch time ever. You know, my stats about to go up. But anyway.
Aaron, go ahead.
Go ahead, Aaron.
The openness of this conversation is what I hope everyone watching takes with them. I hope the conversation that we have had here today will transcend forward in your conversations that you have with other people. Whether they're the same as you, they are different from you, or they're at an extreme end from you. I hope the openness will transcend so that you can have some kind of an understanding in order to empower yourself. The physical shell that we are in, our ears, our nose, our exoskeleton, can be enslaved. But our mind is what we have to use to move forward. We need to educate ourselves. We need to double check our references. We need to constantly be learning and growing so that we don't make the same mistakes we made before. Will we make them again? Sure. But will we have done something different? I hope so. And I believe that a lot of the questions that are being asked in the comments, well, what do we do next? What about this? What about that? I think those are valid questions, and I feel personally validated, not that I was looking for it, but I feel personally validated that people are asking those questions, and they're questions and perspectives that people in this conversation, in this chat, watching this may not have had before. So I say to those people that have those questions, ask them. Ask those questions out loud, but have the conversation about it, because a text message, a post, a story post, whatever, is not going to get the job done. People are going to interpret it however. A buddy of mine, we used to joke about it, bring the phone call back. And I think that's something that needs to happen. Is I think if there's someone on your feed, if you post something and you're having this discrepancy with them, instead of going big block, back and forth, have a conversation with them. Maybe you're not okay, like, giving them your phone number. Maybe you get a Google Voice number, and then like someone calls that and you guys have a discussion on that. Maybe you hit one of us up and we put you on a platform like this where we can mediate and have that kind of conversation. So I think to close, I pose the question, who do you want to be? And how do you see us as a nation moving forward together? And the together, that is a non-negotiable. It is together no matter what. If you're playing on the same basketball team You may not like each other, but you got to play together. And that is the only way you will succeed. So I thank you guys all for listening to us. I want to make sure that if we haven't said it before, we're not experts on any of this. This is just merely our opinions, but it is an openness and it is a dialogue and it is using conversation as currency and as what I believe to be the most valuable currency. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Aaron. So I'm going to wrap this up, and I want to thank the people that were on here. And one of the first things I'm going to suggest in terms of possible solutions at this point is we're going to continue this conversation next week with potentially the same guests, some new guests, some different topics that are involving all this part of this conversation. Ultimately, leading with love is important. Leading with the idea that change is possible with communication, with openness, with love. So I want to continue this conversation with the people that have been involved in this and everybody that's there. But I encourage you to share. And that's not a ploy of like, oh, share the page. It's a ploy of this has been my passion immersively since 2016 is to bring people together and find out how I can change. And it's not easy. And this is the point where I say it's not easy as a white man trying to create change, because no matter how you look at it, you're sometimes looked at either with ulterior motives or that I don't understand or you don't understand, when ultimately all I want to do is find a way to make the world a better place. It starts with the 13 people remaining watching, the 50 people that were on at the highest point of this, but to create a conversation for people to understand things they did not know before, because that is how change happens. That is how we evolve, Jason. Correct. So all I could say is thank you to those that helped with the conversation, being Aaron, Curtis, Danielle,
Dex,
thank you. Next week, I do want to. I think the conversation got more and more valid as we started to get more and more uncomfortable. And I think the more uncomfortable we get, the more knowledge we could bring to people. People on the side, I think we're learning about systematic racism for the first time in their life. People were learning on the experience of other people. So having this conversation is important. So please join again. It means more to me than people understand, because I have taken a lot of flack for my lack of understanding or lack of wanting to change, because I do buck the norm of typical change stereotypes. And I really just want to insert my passion to make things better and to seek truth. And that's what the initial point of the show was truth will set you free. And avoid the media, avoid some of the stuff that tears us apart as people. Watch our words and realize the words coming at us may not be as inflammatory as you think. So I do want to lead you out with the concept of peace and realize that action is always possible in this sense. Come together as people. Be nice to each other right now. Have a conversation. Continue to have the conversation. Don't be offended. Listen. Love each other. I'm going to end with just some images. Aaron, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just last quick thing that I wrote down that I left off. Appreciate one another. I think that's the other thing. The thank yous and the I appreciate yous go such a long way. And that was something that I was just thinking about today with some of the protests and stuff that I've gone to, is just being able to express that to your fellow mankind, womankind, like the thank yous and the appreciation, because they really do make a big difference.
Absolutely. So, and the next time we talk about this, I do want to. There's somebody that's mentioning some of the EMTs, and there is some conspiracy stuff around it. I don't mind talking about it because I think there's some really weird shit happening at all times. So I do want to at least bring that up next week. That was on the agenda. We had 8 million things to talk about. We got a lot done. But there's imagery going on, and there's certain things I want to suggest sharing and not. And originally, I wanted to use this image as part of the show, and Aaron and Curtis talked me out of it because it's not an image of love. But I do find this to be a very powerful image because it is showing where we are right now. In order to realize you have to improve, you have to be broken. At the same token, what I suggest sharing from this moment and viewing and seeing in order to be the change is images like this. And images like this, where people are protecting an officer away from other officers, from the rioters. And images like this, police understand. All police are not bad. Clearly, all black people are not dangerous. But at the end of the day, as we're seeing with these protests and riots, that if there's that element of small groups that can cause the damage and can cause everybody to turn on each other, the same can be said for the police officers. One good cop does not mean 100 are bad, but 100 cops that sit by and watch that one do something bad with no self-responsibility is dangerous. We're seeing that in the riots. If you see somebody doing bad, record it, take video. If you see these rocks set aside, if you see Antifa, if you see people that are suspicious, take video and educate people that it's not us fighting each other. We're trying to come together. And we'll play your video next time, Curtis. I'm an ass. So.
No, you're fine. I'm
right.
not. I'm not tripping at all.
Excellent. Well, thank you.
Video. I'm dropping it next week. I'm joking.
Thank you, guys. Album. I appreciate everybody that stayed on. Please feel free to continue to comment. Please continue to share. Continue to comment so we can have more if we have other stuff to discuss or any points that we might have left off. So thank you, guys. And it's a long night. Have a good evening.